Howdy everybody, welcome to A Deal or No Deal. So what's this about? Well, for people who are in our Property Accelerator membership, you'd be familiar with these because we run one or two of these a month, and that's where I have a look at a deal that's landed on my desk and I pull it apart. We analyse it, we do the due diligence, and ultimately we crunch the numbers and make a call on it. Is it a deal? Does it need a bit more work, or does it just go into the bin? So if you're not a member and you haven't seen A Deal or No Deal, what I'm doing today is just a little bit different. So I'm not starting with a deal, I'm starting with the numbers, sort of starting at the other end, because in our Deal or No Deals, we use what I call the 5-minute feasibility when we're setting it up and when we have a look at the numbers. So I want to spend a little bit of time just telling you about the 5-minute feaso and how you can do it. Now, the whole point of the 5-minute feaso meaning feasibility, in other words, the numbers, the point of it is it's a first quick pass. So when we're looking at a deal, we don't want to spend 2 days working on it only to find out it doesn't stack up. So that's the last thing we want to do. So it's a quick first pass. Also, we need to decide, is it worth spending more time on? Now that's all back to what I was just saying. We don't want to spend days working on it. We do a 5-minute feasibility. If it's looking okay at that point, then we say, okay, let's allocate some more time. Let's dig a bit deeper, a bit more detail, sharpen the pencil. That's what it's about. And I'll tell you something too. Don't go to contract based on a 5-minute feasibility. What it is, it's a quick pass. I guess as an analogy, you could look at something like that. That's a sieve, perhaps at a quarry. And what they do, they just get a bucket of whatever it is, put it on the sieve, and the sieve picks out everything that's bigger than the holes in the sieve. That's what we're doing here. We're throwing the numbers at this particular opportunity and we're seeing if it stacks up. If it goes through the sieve, in other words, if it doesn't stack up, if the margin's too small, then we don't waste any more time on it. However, if it does go through the sieve, what it says to us is, okay, at first look, it could be a deal. Now let's spend some more time on it. That's what we want to do. We don't want to spend days on it to find that out. We want to find that out in 5 minutes, ideally. Now, the 5-minute feasibility is really just a profit and loss format. So if you're familiar with profit and loss statements, perhaps you own a business, quite simply, what they are is your income. You know, if it was a business, it could be from selling stuff, doesn't matter what it is. Your income, less all your expenses, equals your profit. Now that's pretty straightforward. In property development, our income, well, that's from our sales. Our costs or our expenses, well, there's lots of those, and that's what we're going to break down in a moment. So as far as the 5-minute feasibility goes, in a profit and loss format, this is what it would look like per townhouse. Now, what I've got here is the GRV. Now, GRV is gross realisation value. It's a bit of a fancy term, but what it means is the sale price. I'm doing it per townhouse. Now, this could be a situation where, let's say you're doing a 4-townhouse project, and I'm just looking at per townhouse. As developers, we tend to think in single units. Now, ultimately, when we do a proper feasibility, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 or 3, that's what we'll do. But we tend to understand units a lot better. So what I've done here, the sale price or average townhouse is $700,000. That it could be one of 4-pack, and each one 2-story, 3-bedders, whatever it happens to be, sells for $700,000. Now what we've got here is 8 cost centres. This is how I break it down. We've got the land, in this case $195,000 per townhouse. We've got the construction, $270,000 per townhouse. We've got different consultants fees, and I'm going to break these down for you shortly. $15,000 a townhouse. Council fees, $26,000 a townhouse. Now that's going to vary as you go around the country. Finance, $32,000 a townhouse. Marketing, $24,000. GST, $17,000. Miscellaneous, that's just little bits and pieces, $5,000. So when we add up all our costs, we get $584,000. So remember, profit and loss, income less expenditure equals profit, sale price less costs equals profit. Profit, $116,000 per townhouse. Now, as developers, we like to see what the developer margin, the return on cost, the margin on cost, the same thing. And what we do is we express the profit, 116,000, as a percentage of the total cost of 584, and that comes in at 19.9%. Let's call it 20%. So that's a standard 20% sort of deal, and that's a good deal. If we're doing a 4-pack, if it's showing that sort of margin, 18, 20, 21, that's all good, and it's a deal. So there it is, GRV less all your costs from the cost center, profit margin. It's a deal. Now, the reality is, when we're going through a project and we've done the 5-minute feasibility and it's looking good, that's when we start to sharpen up the pencil a bit. And that's when we do, if you like, a long form feasibility. Now, a long form feasibility is simply a feasibility done on, in this case, the Property Mastermind feasibility calculator. So that's where we have pages of inputs and we put in a lot of the detail, a lot more detail than that's in the 5-minute feaso back there, and it spits out the answers. So we end up with a summary page, we've got graphs, we've got Gantt charts, we've got all sorts of stuff that comes out eventually. Now, we don't do that when we first have a look because it takes a while to do that. We use the 5-minute feasibility to decide, is it likely to be a deal? And if it is, then we can do some more due diligence, a bit more research, firm up our numbers, and then run it through the calculator. And that's, for instance, that is a summary page of feasibility. And that summary page is a summary of 4 pages of inputs and lots of calculations. So we've got land acquisition, we've got building permits, finance, marketing, all those things. It's broken it up into headings. So this is what the 5-minute feaso is about. Remember the first one we looked at, land? Well, that's made up of a couple of different components. For instance, it would be the purchase price, stamp duty, and legals. So that's what, land. So we just had it as one thing. We just had that as land, one of those 8 cost centres. But it's made up of a couple of different expenses. Things like construction. Well, the biggest part of that would be the building contract. What does it cost to build the townhouses? But we might have to demolish a property as well. And then we've got all different connections of services. And so within the construction, there's a number of components. That's the main ones, but there's a few others that make up construction. So we're just putting prices on the headings, but each heading has a lot of sub-costs. For instance, consultants, professionals, the sort of people we use. Now, on a typical 4 townhouse project, these would be the consultants that we use. We've got an architect to do our drawings for our development permit, for our construction certificate or building permit. We've got a town planner to help us get the approvals in the first place. First thing never happened, we need the site surveyed. And on the way through, we need various engineers, civil, structural, hydraulics, and we need a landscape architect in there and ultimately a quantity surveyor. So these are a range of different consultants, typically on let's say a 4 townhouse project. But in our 5-minute feaso, we just call them consultants. And what that consultant fee is in the 5-minute feaso is all these ones added up. Things like council fees, well, there's different parts there, and this isn't even all of them, but there'd be application fees for the development permit. Big one would be contributions that council charge as well. And also sealing the plan and a couple of other little bits and pieces as well, council inspection fees that happen along the way. But once again, in the 5-minute feasibility, we just have one heading for council, and it's a number of these smaller costs added up. Things like finance. Okay, well, you've got an application fee for finance, you've got valuations, and of course the big part is the interest. But once again, all that falls under one heading, finance. Marketing, same thing. We've got advertising, the biggest one would be the agent's commission, and we might have to get some off-plan contracts drawn up by a lawyer. So marketing would have one number, would be a total of other things. GST, well look, that's just a calculation. So we've got GST on our sales, and we've got GST on our costs. The GST on our costs we get back. The GST on our sales we don't. And when you take the 2 away, that's the sum net total of the GST. And of course, as I said, we've got miscellaneous, just lots of little bits and pieces. For instance, rates or land tax, title registration, those sorts of things. Lots of little costs that aren't big enough to deserve their own heading. So that's how it works. Have a look here. This is consultants. Now, what I've done here, I've just chosen one of those cost centres. Remember, one of those is consultants, and I did mention them, surveyors, architects. Well, this would be, for instance, a dollar value. That's a reasonable sort of dollar value as you go around the country for those things. There's two types of survey. They come up to 3,500. Architect on the development permit and the building permit. We've got a town planner in there at 5,000. Civil engineer at 5,500. Landscape architect back there at 1,500. Structural engineer 3,500. Hydraulic 2,500. And you can read there. Energy consultant 1,000. Quantity surveyor 8,000. That's a little bit before you start construction, but a lot of that during construction. And ultimately a certifier or a building surveyor if you're in Victoria. So they're our consultants. That's who they are. That's typically what they cost. And so on this 4 townhouse project, the consultants add up to 59,514. That's near enough to 60,000 for me. But that's an average of 14,875 per townhouse. I'd just round that up at 15,000. So consultants, that's a complete breakdown. But in our 5-minute feasibility, it'll just be one number, like it is back here. Consultants, $15,000. Get the feel? So this is a per townhouse. Once again, selling at 700. Land component, construction 270 a townhouse, consultants 15 and so forth. Those council fees might look high to some of you. Now what you have to do is this 5-minute feasibility in this case relates to, let's say, 2-story, 3-bedroom townhouses. And you would have where you live, where you're going to develop, you would have your own set of numbers. So these numbers can vary depending on the product. For instance, if you're doing a 3-bedroom townhouse, that would be different from a 2-bedroom apartment. It'd be a different set of numbers. And the same thing if you're doing one in an expensive suburb compared to one in a less expensive suburb, there could be some differences in the numbers as well. So you need to do it where you're developing. The state, the council, wherever it is. And for instance, what would vary? Well, one of the big things that varies is council fees. As you can see, that's $26,000. Now, this project, if you're wondering, was a Brisbane project. And the council in Brisbane are very hungry. They charge a lot for contributions, hence that's why it's so high. You could go to another council somewhere else, in another part of Australia, and that $26,000 might be $6,000. So you need to know locally what your numbers are. So there is a relationship between what you pay for the land and what you sell it for. A more expensive area, the land component would be higher and the sale price would be higher. That's not rocket science. And you need to understand what a construction cost is, what the council fees are. Consultants don't change much around the country. Finance is pretty much the same everywhere. Marketing is pretty much the same everywhere. GST is the same everywhere. Miscellaneous is everywhere. So there's not a lot that changes as you go around the country. But you just need to set up the figures for your place, for your patch where you're doing a deal. And that's how it is. Once you know these numbers, you can quickly do a 5-minute feasibility. So you could even have some of these as a pro forma where you've printed out these forms without the numbers. And when you come to look at something, you can fill it in. Now that's a 5-minute feasibility. I actually do them in about 2 minutes, but there again, in fairness, I've done thousands of feasibilities in the last 38 years. Most days I do 1 or 2. I probably do somewhere between 6 and 10 5-minute feasos a week working with our mentoring students, because we look at deals and look, let's face it, most deals end up in the rubbish bin, but then every so often a good one comes through. So we use the 5-minute feasibility as a way of culling the rubbish quickly. Get it out of the way, don't waste time on the rubbish, and if something looks good with the 5-minute feasibility, e.g. 20%, then we'll then sharpen the pencil. So what would we do to do that? Well, we'd check our sale prices. We'd have a look at more sales, more recent sales, and make sure that that's the biggest number. That'll make the biggest difference. We'll make sure the sale price is right. We'll dig a bit deeper. We'll sharpen the pencil. And the same thing with a couple of other these. We'll just check on them, sharpen them up, make sure it's good. And if it's still looking good on the second pass, then we'll do a full-blown feasibility on the calculator and jump onto the deal. So if this was a 4-pack, what we do is everything is 4 times. That's a single townhouse. So 4 townhouses is 4 times that, which is that. So that's the 5-minute feasibility done for all 4 townhouses. So obviously sale price 2.8, the land 780. Now in this particular case, that 780 includes legals and stamp duty. There's probably $25,000, $30,000 of legals and stamp duty in there, and it does vary from every state, of course, stamp duty. So that is probably a $750,000 site, plus legals and stamp duty, come up at $780,000. So what that says to me, in this particular area, if townhouses sell for $700,000, a 4-pack, I want to pay about $750,000 for it. That's what it's telling me. And there's all our other costs, 4 times everything. So total profit, $464,000. So that's worth doing. Little 4-pack, $464,000, 20% margin we'll call it. And that's what we can tell from our 5-minute feasibility. So you'll need to do one. If you're only looking at, let's say, 2-story, 3-bedroom townhouses, then all you really need to know is one set of numbers. And there you go. So that is the 5-minute feasibility. Don't spend all day, don't spend 2 days crunching numbers, running around like a rabbit. What'll happen, if you spend too long on a feasibility only to find out it doesn't stack up, you spend a day or 2 days or 8 hours on it to find out it doesn't stack up, you're going to get sick and tired pretty quickly of looking at feasibilities that don't stack up. And the thing to remember is most deals don't stack up. You've got to go through some to get the good ones. And so you're just going to lose energy if you take too long. If you're doing 3 or 4 and they're taking you 2 days, you're going to lose energy. You're going to start to second guess yourself. Your confidence will drop. And heaven forbid, you might even drop out of property development. That'd be a terrible thing to happen. So learn how to do the 5-minute feaso. Kill them quickly if that's what you got to do, and move on from there. So there you go. I hope you've learned something from that. Get out there, build a pro forma, and get the numbers sorted out in your patch. I'll catch you next time.